When I was a teenager, I grew up a stone's throw from the sea. And you could just come out of the house and walk down the end of the road, and there was the beach. It was a pebble beach. It's a beautiful fishing village called LC16. And I often would sleep with my window open, and you could smell the catch that would come in. The fishermen would go out all night, and when they would bring the catch in, if you slept with your window open, you could not only smell the sea breezes, but you could smell the catch. We were that near. And I would often go down early in the morning and got to know some of the people there who would be opening up their little stalls, selling the fish, selling Selzy crab. And it was very familiar. And I loved to be down the beach every day, and the sight and smell of the fishermen and the beach and everything. I remember when Julian and I were first going out together, I persuaded him that he'd never really tasted fish and chips unless he had Selzy fish and chips. So I persuaded him to come along to our favourite pub, the Lifeboat. And we went in there. Instead of having normal fish and chips, they kind of persuaded us to go out into the kitchen and choose a fish, and they persuaded us that they caught this enormous place. What we didn't realize was it took a long time to grow that big. And it's the toughest place I've ever eaten. So that didn't work, but I've apologized since. We had many fish and chips there since. And this morning, I want to talk about a shout from the beach. There was a morning when a group of fishermen had gone out to fish, and they'd had no joy. And the morning was still hazy, and a figure appears on the beach. And just 100 yards out, these guys are coming in from a night of disappointing fishing. And we know these guys are Peter and John and James and Thomas and Nathaniel and a couple of others. And the voice from the beach shouts out, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" And they shout back, "No." Now, there's many ways they could have shouted no. No, no, no. What business is it yours? And then this voice comes, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." And when they did, the nets were almost bursting, but they did not break. And they caught 153 large fish. And as we know, when that miracle happened, they suddenly realized it was Jesus on the shore. This is the third time Jesus appeared to them since he rose again. And they weren't expecting it to be Jesus. And we know that John recognized him. Peter dives into the water, and they get onto the beach, and there Jesus has prepared breakfast. And I love that occasion when they have breakfast and intimacy with Jesus, and he talks with them. But this is the thing about these guys. They're out there fishing, and this is what they have. They have experience. They're experienced fishermen. Okay, they haven't done it for a while, but they have experience. They have knowledge. They have understanding of the tides and the fish and when to go. They weren't naive. They knew what to do. Also, they had intuition, I'm sure, with the weather. They would be able to see a cloud from afar or just smell that something was about to happen. And so they had intuition with their job. And they worked hard. They'd been out there all night. They had hard work and perseverance. But despite all this, they caught nothing. And I think sometimes this is a picture of us. One morning I was praying about the catch. And as I woke up, I was praying, and the Lord showed me this picture, and I could see it like I was stood on the beach next to him, shouting out, a shout from the beach. And it's like almost shouting to us, because do you think, despite our best efforts, despite our experience and our hard work and our intuition and everything we've learned to date, it's still not the catch that we would like, is it? Our nets are still empty, or there's one or two, or they wriggle back. And Jesus introduces into the situation a simple new strategy. Very simple. It's the same boat, it's the same team, it's the same nets, it's the same lake. All he says is, do it on this side. He didn't say it's the wrong boat, you need a different team, Thomas isn't up to it. Same boat, same people, same team, same lake. But instead of fishing this side, they just had to turn their sight and fish this side. And I feel that Jesus today is speaking to us with a shout from the beach to turn our attention to another side. And it's one of many shouts from the beach. I'm not saying once you hear this shout from the beach, it's that's everything solved. We can just go home now and everything be amazing and revival comes and all you needed was my notes and then we're all done. But actually, this is just a shout from the beach of what's happening. Now, interestingly, you could say, it was faith, it was obedience, but they didn't know it was Jesus. So it wasn't faith or obedience, it was desperation. Now, they were experienced fishermen. So when this shout comes from the beach, they could have, had a little committee meeting now. and Peter would chair it, and Thomas would not be sure where he left the agenda for last time, and they could be sitting there and going, well, what does the stranger on the beach know? We're experienced fishermen. Actually, we could be just resistant to this new idea. But instead of that, what surprises me in this incident is that they did it. There was a shout from the beach and they did it. They didn't know it was Jesus. And so it was desperation that made them try something else. And I think partly our desperation, our hunger to see the nation changed is what brings us together despite our differences. That denomination is not an issue, age is not an issue, where we live is not an issue. Doesn't matter if it's city or rural, north, south, east or west, what denomination or flavour we are, we're all in this together because we're desperate for a catch. And what I love, the beauty about being together in New Wine, is that it's not a prescriptive thing that we all have to change our church to fit in a certain mould. We need to do this in all the different shapes and flavours that we are, that's authentic to us and our own histories and where we live. So what is this shout from the beach? Could mission work in a different way? And what we're going to look at this morning is some fresh strategy that might just create the opportunity for some supernatural power, because that fishing expedition was a supernatural result. So we're going to look at two things now. We're going to look at a very simple strategy framework to help you look at strategy in your church and organisation. And then we're going to look at some research. And then we're going to take the research and throw it through the frame and see what happens. And this is about the shout from the beach. And I'm just going to, Matt, can you just lift this up a bit for me? Thank you. Oh, yeah, I can see. I have revelation. Thank you very much. You might not be able to see me, but I can see my notes. Okay, so now this is a very simple strategy framework. There are many models of helping us be strategic in what we do. Those of you in business, this will be very familiar, and we've done this around some of the networks as well. And so we're just looking at a kind of simple way of looking at how we can be effective and strategic in what we do. So this framework starts at the top with vision. And that the first thing we need as leaders is a God-given, Holy Spirit-inspired vision for our own church and where we are. And it needs to be specific. It needs to be defined. Our people need to know what that is, that it's not vague and woolly, but it's actually pinned down. And so this vision also goes with our goals and our strategy. And that is the starting place for us. And that is what motivates people forward. If we want to avoid the kind of what I call the calendar treadmill, it's Christmas, then it's Easter, then it's Father's Day, then it's Mother's Day, then it's summer mission, then there can be like a calendar treadmill within church life. To get us off that treadmill is to say, what is our vision, long term and short term? So in this season right now, what is it for summer? What is it for autumn? What is it for spring? And that we're planning ahead. So firstly, it's our vision. And then secondly, so we should all have one of these. Hopefully we all do, or we need to be reminded maybe we have a big vision, but we haven't said what we're doing this year or this season. And then secondly, it's our action. It's what we do. Now the action is what makes the vision happen. So we have the vision, and then our activities are what make us achieve that vision and get closer to the goal. And so our action needs to come from our vision. But the other thing we have to look at is that we have to ask the question, all our activity and all our doing and all the things we do in church life, is it actually aligned to our vision or is it disconnected? Because if it's disconnected, our vision becomes a dream and our activity burns us out. So we're busy. How are you? I'm busy. How are you? I'm busy. I don't think you're as busy as me. I invented busy. And so we can be busy doing stuff, but is it getting us any closer to our goal? And so it's essential that we have our strategy and then we structure things, our processes, our organization, who does what and where we do it. That all has to be in line with our vision. So we're always asking, how does this get us closer to our vision? And if it doesn't, we axe it. If it does, we invest in it. We need to be brave to do that. So I think that we could almost end the talk there, really. Because in church life, we all know how many things are we doing, but they're not getting us closer to our vision. And then the next part on this little section here is metrics, or I'd call it today measure, what we measure. Now, we have to measure our action, but we measure the action in light of the vision. And this is the part we often don't do. And it's essential. With everything that we do, we ask the question, how are we doing? Is this working? Or are we repeating things on our calendar that didn't work last year, so we put a bit more money and effort into it not working this year? But what we measure tells us what's happening and what's working. Also, we might find when we measure something, we discover the spin-off goals. I remember talking to one lady who said that they decided to do this event to reach their community, and they had a few other churches help them. And at the end of the event, we'd done a little bit of this, and she said they measured it because this was what they'd learned. This was their vision. These were the actions to achieve it, and now they would measure it. And when they measured it, they realized there was no non-Christians at the event at all. But the spin-off was, for the very first time in 25 years, local churches had worked together. So there was a spin-off result. Now, if they hadn't measured, they would have thought the event was a flop. But rather than a flop, it achieved something else. But now when they plan next year, they had to look at, why do Christians have no friends? And that's why they don't invite anyone, because they don't have any friends. So do we need to change some of the things we do? The other thing is, and I'm just going quickly, but I'd love to spend 40 minutes on this, but what gets measured is what gets done. And what we measure shows what we believe is important. Okay, number 4 is culture. Now, the culture invades all of this. And the culture is what it feels like to be around here. So there could be 2 different organizations or 2 different churches, same vision, same actions, same measurement. But the culture could be totally different. And culture invades everything we do. And our culture is informed by our vision. So if we have a vision for the lost, we need to be warm towards the lost, not unfriendly, for example. And so our culture is shaped by our values that come from our vision, and they inhabit our actions. And so how we do it, the how, is essential. So this is just a little summary taste that if at this stage you haven't maybe applied any strategy for a while into your church setting, this might be a useful tool you can use as a team and apply. And you can apply it to your personal life. You can apply it like with what Christy's been talking. Supposing you say, do you know, it's really challenged me, everything Christy said about living more in the presence of the Holy Spirit daily. And that's my vision now. My personal vision for myself is to live more in him, that everything I do flows out of him. Well, that would be our vision. What actions need to take place? We need to push away some of the busyness and spend time with him and be intentional in that. And then we can measure that. We go back to our diary and say, well, I put those times in, but were they squeezed out? And what is the culture? Are we living in the culture of the beauty of Jesus and his Holy Spirit? Well, supposing we say, I'd like to be a better dad. There's something in my personal life. I'd like to be a better dad. That's the vision. I'd like to be a better dad. So what actions need to take place that doesn't remain a vision or a dream, but actually become one? It might say, I need to reschedule. I need to look at my diary. I need to look at what I'm doing. I need to look at my priorities. And we put certain actions into place. And then we measure them and go back and say, how much of that did I fulfill? But also the culture. How am I living towards my family? What does it feel like to be around me? And so you can see this is a very useful little tool, one of many, to just look at strategy. And so why I want to use that is that we're going to talk a little bit this morning about some research that's come out recently. And when we look at that research and we take it and then we throw it through that framework, what do we come out with that might just be a little shout from the beach that instead of looking this way, no catch, we look this way and find there are plenty of fish over here. And so this research, some of you may have seen it already. It's called Talking Jesus. So you can put it up for me, okay? And it's a report that came out, instituted by the Evangelical Alliance with the Church of England, EA Hope, a Barna study. And there's several studies here. When you can access this online through the EA website, there's downloads and everything. Some of their pie charts don't quite work, but they, they've done their best, and they can add up better than me. But with this study, it's taken across the UK, but England as well. So I've chosen the UK version. And so there's the UK statistics and the English statistics. So some of them might overlap a little, but, we forgive that, and that's okay. As things we have our national football thing. I know less about football than Chloe. Matthew and Julian won't watch football with me anymore because they say I'm so annoying. I'm the one who sits there and goes, why has that man got different colour socks to everyone else? Oh, did that hurt? Do you think that hurt? Oh, that man they took off. Did that hurt? Okay, so to go back to the study. The Barna Group, they took a sample of 2,500 adults across the UK, and they got a nationally representative sample of age, gender, region, income. And so this morning, we're going to look at just a sample. I really like to show you these statistics because I think they help us perceive things in a new way. So here we go. I'm just going to go through some of it. Right. Let's go through the slides up there. Okay, so first of all, this is the group of people they took. They asked a question of whether you felt you were a Christian or not. What I love about this is the difference between practicing Christians and non-practicing Christians. I've been practicing so long, I don't know if I'm practicing or non-practicing, but the fact that, some people class themselves non-practicing Christians. That's like saying I have a driving license, but I never drive. But anyway, what the good thing about this is that 58% of the UK identify themselves with Christianity. Does that surprise you? That's way bigger than we realized. There's only 10% Christians, practicing Christians, which means they pray, read their Bible, and go to church at least once a month. Oh, highly committed. And so, but there's 48% there, and if you include the Christians as well, 58%. We're a secular nation, but 58% associate themselves with Christianity. That's an interesting figure. And only 42% non-Christians. So this leaves, in Wales, there are 4% practicing Christians in Wales. Now that tells us 96% of our nation are not Christians. They don't know Jesus, don't know he exists, don't know who he is, apart from perhaps a swear word, have no idea, only pray to God to pass a test. So 96% is our mission field. Okay, I love this one. 6 in 10 UK adults believe that Jesus was a real person. Now really look at these statistics here. There's about, depending on the age group, 61, 57, 63, let's call it 60%. 60% of people believe Jesus was a real person who actually lived. Can you see we're a long way further than we imagine in how people feel about things? 60% believe Jesus was a real person who really lived. However, about 25% think that Jesus is a mythical or fictional character. So you've got Santa, Jesus, and the Easter Bunny. And so a lot of people believe they've heard little stories in assembly in school, or their teacher has warned them that, if they're naughty, Santa won't come, and then they've got to draw a picture of Jesus in a manger, and it's all big one thing. And so especially in the under 35s, they think that Jesus is probably made up. That tells us something. And then we got, inevitably in Britain, 17%. Okay, so this is what they believe about Jesus. That that Jesus is God in human form who lived among people in the first century. That's quite high. That up to like 24% believe that Jesus was real. He really was God. That's amazing, that is. And then there's about, kind of 20% say he was a normal human being. He did live, but he wasn't God. And then some people say, well, he was a prophet or a spiritual leader, but not God. This is interesting. We'll unpack it a bit in a minute. Okay, 44% of all UK adults believe in the resurrection of Jesus. They believe he rose again. They've heard it. He died, he rose again. They believe it. 44%. These are words chosen by UK adults to describe Jesus. I'm only really interested in the end one, the non-practicing Christian. Nearly 60% Jesus was loving, spiritual 58%, peaceful 55%. This is what the non-Christians in the UK right now, the research was done last year, believe about Jesus. That he is loving, that he is spiritual, and he is peaceful. Most UK non-Christians say they know a Christian. They know one. And this is the percentage of where they know them. 35% of people know a Christian who's in their family. 35, that's a lot. That's over a third of people have a family member somewhere who's a Christian. And a friend is 38%. Look at all these Christians out there befriending everybody. We're actually doing something right for a change. All this friendship evangelism for like 50 years that, we're all arguing, do we believe in it or not? And it's like, well, we're friends with people and we believe in Jesus and we influence them. 38%. An acquaintance, 15%. Now, this is the sad thing. When it's a workmate, it goes down to 7%. Where are all those closet Christians in work? Right? There's 38% have a friend who's a Christian. Those Christian friends are all in the workplace hiding. Look, only 7% know a workmate. Well, that's weird how that statistic changes. And 1% know a church leader. Now, we're going to look at what this means for us. 1% of people know a church leader, but 38% have a friend who's a Christian. Okay. Oh, now this is interesting. Let me go back one. UK non-Christians attribute more positive than negative qualities to the Christians they know. So this is what people think about Christians. And this might surprise you. About 65% say Christians are friendly. 50%, 52%, they're caring. They're good-humoured, generous, encouraging, and hopeful. This is how you are perceived by friends and family and work colleagues. When they're asked, well, what do you think of Christians then? What do you think they're like? Now, the media will tell us a very different story of how we're perceived. But this is the reality. These are the facts. People think we're friendly, caring, good-humoured, well, some of us, generous, encouraging, and hopeful. That's good. Now, these are the negatives. Look how small this is by comparison, right? The media would have us think that everybody thinks Christians are homophobic, unhappy, invasive, uptight, narrow-minded. Look how tiny that statistic is, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, how small. Let's go back one to the positives. Can you put it up for me? There, look at that. Now go down to the little one. Now back to the big one. I want you to see. I want this to go in. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, more than half UK non-Christians who know a Christian have had a conversation with them about Jesus. And so you can see again, the most conversations are with a family member or a friend. This is where the conversations about Jesus are taking place. What happened in that conversation? Now, this is how it is perceived by the person who had the conversation. So the Christian has a conversation with a non-Christian, and this is how they say. They say 20% wanted to experience the love of Jesus for themselves. 19% asked for prayer. 18% want to know more about Christianity. 17% express an interest in church. So can you see how positive, what a positive response for people having these conversations. The non-Christian is like, I'd like to know more. I'd like to come to your church. I'd like to know more about Jesus. Will you pray for me? And this is the last one. These are the top positive influences in becoming a Christian. And so can you see the ones on the right-hand side on the screen there? Growing up in a Christian family, 41% said, well, I'm a Christian now, or I became a Christian by growing up in a Christian family. Nearly 29% attending church services. Now, we question if that happens anymore, but there's 29% getting saved through church services, 28% just from reading the Bible. Conversations with a Christian they know well, 27%. Just a divine experience of the love of Jesus, a spiritual experience you can't explain. And so here are people's responses of how they became a Christian. And you can see that it's overwhelmingly being with people, going to church, reading the Bible, conversations with other Christians, and experiencing the love of Jesus. And this is what's happening in our country right now. So, yes, good. So, we're going to you can take the picture off the screen now because it's just like doing my head in to see myself on this screen here. So, can you just, no, we don't need that now. That's just, it's doing my head in yesterday with the photographer, but, it's a bit distracting, if that's okay. You can see me well enough. You don't need to see me twice, do you? Do you? Okay, let's have a look at what happens with those statistics when we take them back through the leadership frame. And so we take that knowledge we have now of what's happening in our land right now, and people can sometimes be reluctant with statistics, but I think it's putting numbers on what we're already feeling. It's putting numbers on what we're seeing. It's explaining our experience to us of what's happening right now in the nation. So vision, first of all, when we look at the vision, what do those statistics tell us that our vision as churches should be? Because there are many things that we could focus on. But when we realize that only 4% of Wales is Christian, how does that affect our vision? The priority has to be mission, because 96% are not saved. And so if we are living a Jesus life, we will want to reach them. Number 2, what vision do we have when we learn that 60% of people believe Jesus was a real person? Yay, amazing, 60% do. But 26% think he's fictional. 20% think an ordinary man, but not spiritual or God. How does that affect our vision, our goal? Well, when we realize that there's such a lack of religious literacy, we need education. We need to have a vision for educating our community of who Jesus is and who God is, because they don't know. They think he's a fiction, like Santa or the Easter Bunny. And so when we know as well that the under 35s are more likely to think Jesus is a fictional character, we need to have a vision for changing the way we do things, for spiritual education in every conversation and every setting that we have. We need historical proof that Jesus was an actual, real historical figure. And there's lots of ways of doing that we're going to look at in the way we speak, the way we talk. And I'm not talking about getting people into a room and doing a kind of 8-hour historical review of why Jesus was a real historical figure. But more, we just put it into everything we say. We anchor it in history. We anchor it in time and place. When you read through like the Gospel of Luke, who is a historian, see how he anchors everything in who was the king at the time and who was the governor and where it was and how many. He anchors it. And in all our communications, it's not enough now to just be saying Jesus this and Paul that. Who's Paul? Is that the guy down the chippy? But we need to know, who are these people? We need to anchor it in historical reality. And so it's not enough anymore either to just talk about our personal experience with Jesus. It's not enough to say to people, well, since I met Jesus, it's been amazing. I just flooded with peace and I'm not anxious anymore. And while testimony is important, people go, well, that's great. There's such tolerance now that people go, I love your experience and I love my experience. And you carry on with your experience and I carry on with mine. And so just bringing the experience of Jesus isn't enough. People go, great, good for you. Tell me more. Great. And I tell you what happened to me down the golf club. But instead, we've got to anchor it, that people realize that Jesus is not a myth. He's not like Santa. That's your first big discouragement in life. You grow up, everyone's convinced you that this Santa is real, coming to your house with presents, and then you dawn that everybody conned you. And it's the first disappointment of learning, maybe I can't trust the adults in my life. And we don't want people to think the same about Jesus. I believed it in school, but he's not really real. So what happens when we start to anchor Jesus in reality and people realize he's real? Then the penny drops and they go, oh no, he's real. What does that mean for me? The challenge happens by itself. So let's anchor that history, but not like in a history lesson. We just throw it in here and there. We'll look at that a bit later. So what does this tell us our goals should be? We need fresh vision to educate our audience and take nothing for granted. So we're doing a series on Elijah at the moment, and we know that there's a lot of people in our church who aren't Christians, or on a journey of faith, and so we have to do previously on Elijah. And we have to recap in brief. We have to kind of create a way that people can access what's going on if they've never, ever heard it before. You can't take it for granted. You can't say, well, Mount Carmel was a blast, because they don't know what you're talking about. It sounds like a new Cadbury's chocolate. And so we have to be able to educate. Also, we found an interesting thing. For us at Cornerstone, we pioneered up in Penlan. And this is our Sunday venue, but the heart of our church is in Penlan. That's where we work every day with all our projects, reaching the community. And our church, because our church is the people, it's not like based in any building. So we're kind of a church that straddles two venues. Hence the very complicated name Venue 2, because it's our second venue. So in our other venue in Penlan, we've been working for 25 years, and when we went there was terrible poverty, young people with truancy and crime and teenage pregnancy, and through some of the projects, it's brought the crime rate down by 25%, it's brought the teenage pregnancy rate down. You can park your car now without, and it's still there when you come out the building, and it's kind of in a generation, it's changed the area. And so now with the different events we put on, people are coming along who are now bringing their children, and they were recipients of the project. And so now, rather than being a stranger, people aren't sure, we're part of the fabric of their lives. And there's a brand new openness. And now we started, Matthew and I crafted these things called Easter experience, St. David's Day experience, Christmas experience, because people can't come into like a church meeting, so we need to put it on like some kind of experience. They come in and there's different things going on in different rooms. There's hot dogs, there's a kind of a little sports bar, there's face painting, there's all different things going on that families come in and they can engage, and the church can engage with them, and then the band do a couple of secular songs that they can recognize and feel at home, and then they know it's the story time. And so the story time is us preaching the gospel in any which way we can, and they love it so much now they sit right down the front. In fact, when they come in, they reserve their seat so they can go off and have a hot dog and watch the rugby and chat to people and make a cake and do whatever it is they do. And then they all come in, and when we explain the gospel and preach, they all lean forward like this. You can hear a pin drop. It's packed. Over 100 non-Christians who just coming to all the projects, and they come along and they want to know more. And we know it's an education. And this is what's happened for us. The story is no longer a vehicle for the gospel. The story is the gospel. And so they don't know anything. So we've got to think differently. So rather than do the story and think, oh, at which point do I slip in the gospel now that, they might quite not notice, but it might do some good. Rather than that now, we're just unpacking the whole story. They don't know about Jesus. They don't know how he was born. They don't know about the exciting escape to Egypt, and he was nearly, killed before he started anything. And so we were able to bring the stories. The St. David's Day, when we did the story of St. David, it was absolutely mind-blowing. And then we could go into healing in just a cool healing cafe, way, and see people healed. And so there's a new openness that because people don't know anything, they're hungry, they're thirsty. And what I've learned is we've got to go way back. It's no good doing like a little preach, throwing in the gospel and hoping people make a life-changing decision the first time they hear it, because they're still learning. Who is God? There really is a God, and he cares about me. That's weird. He has a plan for me. I don't even know if I have plans for me. And Jesus, I didn't know Jesus was real. He is real. He healed people. Is that true? Oh gosh, I just saw that lady get healed over there. Maybe he is true. And there's a whole process. Now, one of our new Christians, Carl, he was coming along to one of Matthew's project, under fives football. And he's just a dad coming along. And he came along, and then one day his girlfriend came along, and she had a bad leg, and Matthew prayed for her. And then he popped over their house later in the week and said, oh, here's an invite to the healing cafe. Come along if you like. Natalie's got a bad leg. And so then a few weeks later, it was our Christmas experience. And we've got photos now where they're sat there in the front row taking photos of everything and watching what's going on. Then by Easter, they're at the Easter experience, and they're there hearing hearing about the whole story of Easter that they never heard before, that Jesus is real, what he did, it's incredible. That is the whole preach. It is the story. And then a few weeks later, we had a Father's Day barbecue, and it was just a barbecue. That's it, just free food. And about 100 more came along. 150 people just piled over from the estate. We ran out of food, someone had to go and buy more. And it was just space for conversations. And Matthew got chatting with Carl, and he said that years ago he'd had a martial arts injury, and he played a lot of sports, but he couldn't play any because he was in pain all the time. So Matthew said, should I just pray for you? And it's like in this nut setting now, it's footballs and kids running around and ketchup, and Carl said, sure. So Matthew, like ducking for any balls going past, he just prays for Carl. Carl gets totally healed of all the pain. The presence of God comes on him. So Matthew goes over his house a few weeks running, leads him to the Lord, he becomes a Christian, and then he starts coming along to church. He's bringing his family, his children. At Christmas service here, Natalie became a Christian. And this is the thing, he said to Matthew, after he became a Christian, he said, I've been thinking in the back of my head about God for 2 years, but I didn't know if I was allowed to church, so I'm glad you found me. That's amazing, isn't it? There's plenty of fish. There's plenty of fish. They're just over here. And we need a shout from the beach that just wakes us up to the reality of what's going on in our nation right now. Because we're operating missionally with paradigms that are no longer relevant. So anyway, moving on. Number 2. Action. So that's just some thoughts. And what I want to do today is not like give you some prescriptive list, but I want to provoke you. I want to, this is my aim. I want to make you look this way. I want to make you look another way. I want all of us to say, Jesus, give me that shout from the beach. So I'm not going to give answers. I'm going to provoke lots of questions because it'll be different in all our settings. You know, some of these really won't work for you. But what will happen is as you're hearing the statistics, the Holy Spirit will tell you things that will work beautifully in your setting. So, you know, if my examples don't fit you, well, great. The Holy Spirit will give you ideas of your own. So let's just explore another one. So action. How does the research affect our action and our activities and the things we actually do? And I kind of divided this into 2 things. These are the things we mostly do as church leaders. We communicate and then we do activities. Would you say? You know, from our role of leading our church and things, there's our communication and our activities. So let's look a little bit at our communication first. How does this research affect what we teach and how we teach? So number 1, just some thoughts. 48% of people are seen to relate to Christianity. They describe themselves as non-practicing Christians. That's so funny. So this shows us people feel more positive towards Christians and Christianity than we thought. They feel about Jesus that he is loving and peaceful and spiritual. And they have an openness. Oh, I didn't know about that. Would you like to tell me a bit more? Oh, that's interesting. So there's a new environment. So in this environment, the old way of doing things is not appropriate because now it's more like sharing with a friend. If you have a friend that you've been sharing your life with and Jesus with for some time, how do you communicate Jesus with them? It's through sharing, it's coming alongside. It's like linking arms and saying, well, let's go over here together. And let's just take this little stroll over here together. They're like more on team than we realized. They're more with us than we know. So we're not having to land something on people, but we're actually bringing them with us. We're kind of acting on the assumption they already know. Hey, we all know this, don't we? Let's go on this journey together. It's invitational. It's a whole different culture. It's a different style. So it's a new friendship way of it, the very tone that we have. Now, mostly we have a horrible us and them with non-Christians. Oh, there's a non-Christian in the room. Oh, we actually got one, did we? Where are they? Where are they sitting? Oh, yeah. Oh, I could see it was him. So we got this like us and them. Or it's horrible when you go somewhere and you hear people praying, Lord, those of us in the room who love you. And I'm like, Those of us in the room? I can't believe we're saying that. We're creating an us and them. We're presuming they're the them and we're the us. Those of us who already know Jesus in the room, not you poor sinners over there. And our very language betrays the us and them. And so we've got to just throw those things out. We can't be praying, those of us who know you, Lord. We just say, Lord, you're amazing. We include everybody in our language. So less arguments to persuade. Let's throw out the compelling statistics to convince. It's a more stroll, arm in arm, weaving in the truth in all that we say and do. The other thing is the power of healing stories. In this section, we're asking about how we communicate. So people aren't always convinced, like, oh, I have warm, fuzzy feelings. Yeah, well, I get that from something else, my warm, fuzzy feelings. Like, you have experience, I have experience. It's not so convincing. But healing stories. We have a couple we've been witnessing to for some years, and we were telling them the other day about some of the healings we'd seen recently. And they put their knife, we were having dinner, they put their knife and fork down, and they went, we thought we knew you. But now we're very confused. Because they know we don't lie, and they didn't want to believe it, but they know us so well now. They know it has to be true. It's provoking. So a friend of mine who's not a Christian, we go for coffee now and then, and she always talks about her stuff, and she asks me, how did it go? So I told her this, did I tell you this little story from New Zealand that I told her? These are the things, when we share our healing stories, all around Wales, the stuff going on in healing cafes is awesome. We just need more non-Christians invited along to them, because we're getting all the Christians healed. Well, that's good, because we realize healing works, but we need to actually get some non-Christian friends. So anyway, she said to me, how did your trip to New Zealand go? Because earlier in the year, we went to New Zealand to do some ministry there. And so I was chatting about different things. And I said, you never guess what happened. I said, I was in this, she knows I like to be really planned. I like to be really, really planned. And I was speaking in a youth meeting. And months before, I was like, Lord, give me something for the youth meeting. Nothing. Give me something for the youth meeting. Nothing. Get right up to going. Got all my talks all planned, all in Polly pockets, everything. Nothing for the youth meeting. Oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. On the plane, nothing. Get there, nothing. On the camp, nothing. Get to the day, still nothing. I'm like, Lord, I'm a little bit desperate right now because I could make something up, but actually I just want to do what you want to do. Nothing. We get into the meeting. We're actually in the meeting now. The worship's going on. And I said to I'm at the back now, trying to look just cool and relaxed, all these youth. Just really, I'm freaking out. I've got nothing to say. I got a little bit of paper in my pocket with some ideas on it. And I said to the girl, how long we got in the worship? And I was thinking, at any moment now, just revelation's going to come, And she said, this is the last song, you're on next. So I went up, I stood at the front, I was looking at all these young people, I had nothing to say, I just had nothing to say. I know you can't believe this, and I had nothing to say. I had nothing to say. And so in my pocket, I'd done this little thing, 3 lost things. So I took this scrap of paper out, and I spoke on 3 lost things. It took me 6 minutes, and I had 45 to go. And as I put it in my pocket, I felt the Lord say to me, feet. I was like, okay. And I looked, and the guy in the front had his foot all bandaged up. And I said, oh, I think the Lord wants to heal feet. And then I said, if you've got bad foot, come out. So anyway, 6 young people come out to the front. And this is the variety of feet. Now, this boy on the end has an infected toe that they can't do anything about because it's trapped under the nail. The doctor doesn't want to pull his nail out. There's an infection underneath, the antibiotics aren't working, and he's in agony. So he's on the end. Then there's someone else, some foot thing, can't remember. A girl here, stress fracture. A boy here, he had broken something in his foot. And then the guy on the end had an ingrowing toenail. Now, these kids are like 15 to 17. Ingrowing toenail that they weren't able to do the thing they needed to do. So he's in constant pain, couldn't join in the sport. So all these kids just want to get healed to join in the games. And so I pray for the girl with a stress fracture, because I'm going to teach them how to pray. Pray for the girl with a stress fracture. She gets healed immediately. She's jumping up and down. All the pain's gone. She's texting her parents. All the kids like, oh, this really works. So we teach them how to pray. So I invite the kids to come out and pray for their friends. So while we're all praying and teaching all of this, and praying for this boy here with the torn ligament, and his friends all pray for him, and he gets half healed with his friends praying. So we just couldn't quite get the end bit. So I said to him, walk to the door and turn round. So he walks to the door. He's very cool as well. He's like trying to walk cool with a bad foot. So he walks and as he turns round, he's healed, totally healed. Well, they're all freaking out now. All the young people are going mental. And at this point, suddenly this boy runs over from this side. This boy runs over with his friends. He runs over and he can't speak. He's in tears. He's trying not to cry in front of his friends. And he goes, I'm healed, I'm healed. And I look down. This is the thing with kids. They show you everything. So he'd already shown me his disgusting ingrowing toenail. It was foul. And so he runs over. I look down, perfectly normal feet. Just in front of everybody. So his friends all rejoice and go nuts. He's trying to do a test to me without crying. While this is going on, suddenly this group explode over here. And this boy comes running over, holding something in his hand, running over like this. Running over. I'm like, oh. He's run over and he went, look. And he opened up his hand. There's his toenail. And when his friends prayed for him, the nail popped off, all the infection came out, all pain gone. So I'm in Costa just telling my friend this. Slightly less dramatically. But what happened after this is the strangest thing. I went to sit down. There's a young girl from the worship, really skinny young girl. And I went to sit next to her, and she said, I have a condition that my parents can't afford the operation. I can't breathe. I have what's called a pigeon rib. Now, you know your ribs lie flat on, they go round, but they're flat on your chest. Well, her rib was poking out like that. So when she stood sideways, there's this rib poking out like that. It made a hole here, hard to breathe. It was going to cost $26,000 or something to fix. Her parents couldn't afford it. And she said, I never thought of asking Jesus if he could heal me, but now I've seen that. I wonder if he can. And I said, well, let's pray. And so she put her hand on her rib. That was really quite gross, sticking out. And they show you everything, so sticking out like this. She put her hand on her rib, and I put my hand. And as we prayed, the bones moved. And the bones moved, and the rib went in. And so there's just a tiny little knobbly bit sticking out. I couldn't tell if she was like leaning in or something. And I said, stand up. And she stood up and she could breathe. She went to the toilets to check herself. And then she came back and all her friends were like, oh my goodness, look at you, because they could see. So healing, when we share with our friends healing that we see, you can't argue with that because your friends know you. And they know you're not going to make up a story like that. You couldn't think it up. And so when we're speaking to people, how we communicate, as we're seeing and being brave in stepping out in healing, it's God who does it. So let's do it more and share it with people. And of course, we know the power of a transformed life. When somebody in a community or a school or somebody gets saved, when you get a student in a pile of students and they get saved, all those students know that person is changed. And so these are the things that we need to communicate. So moving on to number 2, Jesus, a fictional character. Now, one little thought on this with Jesus is this. I think sometimes our language actually confirms people's misconception that Jesus is false. Because when we always talk about stories, or the story of the boat, the story of the loaves and fishes. And I wonder if we should be changing our language. Instead of keep talking about the story, which sounds like a fiction, could we be saying, for example, do you remember the incident when Lazarus came out of the tomb? Do you remember the occasion when this happened? Rather than saying the story, the occasion this happened. Or do you remember that eyewitness report that Luke records of this? When the historian Luke wrote, or when Mark wrote this down in a hurry. Or, there's different ways of actually expressing that when we're communicating, it's small things, but let's keep saying it's a story. What about weaving in archaeological evidence? It's just weaved in, so it's not like a big seminar, but when we're doing Elijah at the moment, we're talking about Ahab's palace and how they found bits of the ivory palace and his stuff like that. So it just brings it in. I remember Matthew doing a story once for a bunch of kids and brought out, talking about the coins that we use and a Roman coin that would have been there when Jesus was around. And it's just things that help to anchor it in time and place. Something we also like to do, but maybe this is a step too far for you, but when we do stories from the Bible, we do like to put modern day actors as the characters. So, recently we've had the night manager as Obadiah, and we have had Brad Pitt playing King David. That was a good series. And so maybe sometimes that just helps anchor it in modern day. And lastly on this section, 44% of people believe in the resurrection. 44%. Does that give you more confidence in explaining the gospel? We don't need to do it bite-sized. We need to try and slip it in there, but we can actually explain the gospel, because most people are halfway there. But this is the difference. It's how we apply it. It's not enough for people to know the information. 44% go, sure, Jesus died and he rose again. Great, he rose again. They believe that. You don't have to convince them of that. But we have to apply what that means. That if Jesus really rose from the dead, what does that mean for me? So the facts are not enough. We have to help people apply them. Now, I know some of Chloe's school friends that she's grown up with over the years, they would all agree by now that Jesus died, rose again. They would agree with that. But it's the actual applying it that my life might change. So these are things we've got to think about. Anyway, secondly, on action is activities. So the first one is this. What about social time? Now, I know that as leaders, we work all the time. We find it hard to have social time, but social time is very important. Most people who know a Christian, it's their family or friends. 1% know a Christian leader. So does this change? This is huge, really. We have to think about this. This is huge. Most non-Christians, their contact time with Christians is friends and family, not church leaders. And so how does this shape, for us as church leaders, how does this shape the mission? If we've got a vision to see the lost saved, how does that affect our actions? What activities will we do if 1% know a Christian leader or get saved that way? So do we create more time and space for the social? That we actually craft things that create time and space for those conversations and for people who know a Christian and actually like speaking to them and are interested more. And are our programs so tight, learning about evangelism, that we're not actually out there in mission or allowing space for our people to do it? And so our church is... all our churches are well connected in multiple ways with non-Christians all through the week. So how are we inputting that? And how are we creating? Can we create a church social life? There's always something to invite someone to. Big things, little things. At the cafe, at the pub, going for a walk. Over here doing, whatever it is, ordinary, everyday things. Lots of little things we can invite people to have contact time with us and our friends, rather than putting on big, expensive mission and trying to bring everyone in, and it's all the Christians who turn up to hear the great speaker, and there's maybe 20 non-Christians there, because they're all out there having a barbecue. So why don't we get out there? And it's just a bit of a challenge that if that are what the statistics are, does that shape our style of mission? 20% of our family and friends want to know more. They want to know more. And I think our role is to help our members understand that and be less shy. We have an identity crisis as Christians. It's almost like being ashamed of who we are. And we've got to open that up, that people realize that people out there are interested. So number 2, I'm looking at the corporate thing of what we do together. 29% of people get saved from coming to church. So how can we encourage them to come to church if 29% get saved in church? It's talking about a church meeting or a church event. But how accessible are we? Do people know where we meet? Is our building imposing? Is it anything inviting about it? How do we give our congregation confidence to bring someone to church? And what do they encounter when they get there? So is it time to adapt what we do with some of our meetings and how we do church, that people might actually want to come, and what happens when they're there? It's a bit like looking the other side. It's a tweak. It's not a new boat. It's just looking to the side. And there are some things we may need to change. Number 3, 28% get saved from reading the Bible. Is this something we're missing? Do we have a big box of Bibles ready to give out a moment's notice? Have we always got Bibles to give out? Are they easy to read Bibles? Do we have sections of the Bible? You know when like different things come out, like the rugby or the Euro, there's always some little Mark's Gospel or something that's a slice with like rugby players in the front. Do we have slices of the Bible? What are we doing with the Bible if 28% get saved from reading it? Can we encourage our church members that when they buy a new Bible, or just to go and buy a few Bibles, they've always got one they can give away or leave somewhere? And lastly, 41% get saved growing up in a Christian home. How are we investing in children and youth? When we plan church, what is happening with the children? Are we just doing church for us and the children are just pushed out on the side here till they grow up to an age when they're fed up and they don't come anymore? Or are we saying church is for children too? How do we include them on a Sunday? How do we include them in a barbecue? How do we include them in what we're doing? How do we include the young people? How do we not babysit the young people too long so they never transition from Sunday school into the meeting, because they're having like youth Sunday school till they're 20 and then they decide they don't want to come anymore? So it's just a challenge what we do about that. And moving on to measure. How do we measure this? So in light of the statistics, how do we measure if our vision is for the lost? We change some of the actions and the way we communicate, and how do we measure? So some of the thoughts with measuring is this. Number 1, numbers. It's inadequate to find out how many were at our barbecue. Right, we have a barbecue to invite all our non-Christian friends. How many there? Well, there was 50. Oh, it's amazing, we had 50 people. How many non-Christians did we have there? 0. Yeah, counting isn't enough anymore. But what we've got to say is, were any of our intended target group at this event? We put all this event on for non-Christians. Were they there? And if not, why not? And what do we do about that? We don't just ask, oh, it's a great event. Oh, wasn't that great? It's really nice. The burgers tasted so brilliant. But if there's no non-Christians there, we have to say who was in the room. We need to be looking at these things. Or also the contact. So, when you put something on, you do a barbecue, there's 50 people there, 20 are non-Christians, 30 are Christians. Where are the Christians? They're all over here talking to each other. We know, don't we? And all the non-Christians are over here kind of on their own or talking to each other with 1 or 2 keen Christians chatting to them. And all the Christians are over here to totally forget. So we need to be thinking, what education do we need with our own people? That when we put on an event, like we had to say at our church meeting the other night, we said, right, we've got the Father's Day barbecue coming up. This isn't a church barbecue. We just had a church party last week. This isn't a church barbecue. If you come, don't eat, just chat. Because there might not be enough food for the non-Christians. There's going to be over 100 non-Christians there. If you come to work. We don't want people turning up and chatting to their best mate and eating the burgers. I sound really hard now. We all know it's true. So what about contact time? Now, Chloe is our missions worker for students. And she's able to have very big vision for things. And she said, well, all the students are coming into the city. Why don't we, rather than dragging them all the way up to Venue 2 or Penlan, we go down to them and we do a beach party. And she set up this brilliant beach party with, a marquee and games and lights and barbecue and all these different things. And 100 non-Christian freshers turn up. And she has a team of 50 Christians. And they all hang out, great conversations. Many of them came to church, really successful event. It was so successful, she said, well, on Bonfire Night, why don't we do it again? Because Bonfire Night in Swansea, everyone piles down the beach to watch the Swansea City Council fireworks in St Helens for free. And so you can pay and go in St Helens, but most of the city are on the beach watching for free. And so she said, well, why don't we capitalize on this and we'll do a student freshers thing. So again, a different 100 students turn up. It's amazing. But on that occasion, how many Christians turned up to help? 6. So those 6 people were very busy all night getting around all the students. Great event, but what about the contact time? And these are things we've got to be thinking when we're looking at what is it we're measuring. It's not enough to say the numbers, but we say we're our target group there. It's not enough to know the target group were there, but did anyone interface with them? Was any contact going on? And lastly, the culture. And when we look at the culture, we know that's what pervades everything. So how does the research affect our culture? Firstly, this. The research reveals we can see there's a warmer attitude. We all know this, don't we? I think especially in Wales, all the community projects have paved the way. Churches all over the nation are now active in their community, and it's paved the way for a warmer attitude because we've become a friend, we become a helper, and we become relevant. And so the majority of non-Christians, the research shows, know a Christian, think well of them, and describe them as friendly, caring, good-humoured, generous, and helpful. I want us to note this. The reality of how we are perceived. 50 to 65% say we're friendly and caring. Only 4 to 9% think we're boring, hypocritical, uptight and sad. But we think in our head that's how we're viewed. And we have like an identity crisis as a church, that we're kind of defensive because we think we're viewed, like the media portray us, as hypocritical, uptight, mean, boring, but actually people who know a Christian say they're friendly, they're loving, they're caring, I want to hang around them. And this is what we need to communicate to our church, that there's a new landscape. And we need to really change this self-view, because this is what happens. When we realize that 1 in 5 people are open to finding out about Jesus, it's like saying to our church, look, there's fish. Don't worry about the ones who aren't interested. Yeah, don't worry. But here there's an openness. Look over this side, there's fish. Now, our church culture, we know, if we were honest, we know our church culture has become shy, retreatist, inward-looking, weak. We anticipate hostility. It becomes easier to retreat into a spiritual club and not do mission at all. And that's what's happened. And that view of ourselves affects our flavour of mission. It affects our culture. So because we expect resistance, our mission when we do it is either tentative, or it's like we do all of this and a tiny little bit of the gospel, and there's this huge, great big build up to it, and then we just try and squeeze it in instead of being open. Or we can be quite combative in the way that we do it. Or because we expect resistance, we try to persuade and cajole and convince, when actually people just want a conversation, get you on my arm, and let's go on this journey together. And the way that we've done it is kind of old and out of date now to the new setting. So we know we all need a culture of welcoming church, a welcome atmosphere at our church events, our socials, our meetings, the love of Jesus shown out in just being normal, ordinary, warm and welcoming. The old culture needs to go. That kind of defensive, we got a gospel night, so let's build it up, we'll build it up, and then maybe, just maybe when they're ready, at the end we'll slip in the gospel. But there's a new openness now. And that old way, that kind of defensive way, is out of place with where people are at. It's apologetic, it's embarrassing, it's trying to convince people. But we just need to be plain. We need to explain it like it is. People are hungry, they want to know. People want to know, when this life ends and I die, what happens next? If God is real, what does that mean for me? And we need to find ways of talking about it and explaining. So the research shows that even though we're in a secular society, the vast majority still identify with the Christian faith, and at this time are open to what we say. So we need to draw alongside. We need to take them to the next step of awareness with education, understanding, and faith. We need to do it with positivity, upfront, not embarrassed, but not pushy. It's like being at peace with ourselves, with this life-changing message, and being able to recognize the new landscape that we're in, and answer people's questions, take them on a journey, and demonstrate through authentic lifestyle that Jesus is real. People don't want the convincer, they just want to watch your life. And so, ending now today, I hope this research has shaken up our thinking a little bit. I hope it makes us, it gives a language to the experience, what we're seeing and happening already. And this is the thing I really like about this picture of the boat. The catch was large, but the nets didn't break. And sometimes our churches dread us as leadership, like coming back from a conference with big new ideas. We're suddenly going to change everything. New boat, new team, new lake. But it wasn't. It was the same team, and it was the same boat, and it was the same lake, and it was the same weather. Nothing had changed. But it was just looking in a new direction. And nothing broke. It was a big catch. Nothing broke. The nets didn't tear. It was the same, but there was something empowering and supernatural in seeing what was there. And I want to invite you with me as well. This research really excites me. I want to say, Jesus, give that shout from the beach to me. I want to ask you, what is your shout from the beach? As you're sitting here today, what is it that the Holy Spirit is saying to you that you say, I need to change just that one thing? Just the attitude in which we do that, or the way we do that event, or I would prefer to do this. What is that? Just for one moment, just say to the Lord. I'm sure, you've got lots of ideas while we've been talking. Just say to the Lord, Lord, I just hear you now shouting from the beach. It's over here. And just give that one thing to him. And I want to invite you to commit to change. To commit. Because the old way of doing things won't work anymore. And we've heard a lot of prophetic word from up here that there's a time window for what we're seeing. And we can't take it for granted that it will still be here. And recently when we were studying Elijah, I learned a weird thing about ravens. That it's only the young ravens who can take in new information and do new stuff. Old ravens, once they mate for life, they're going to have their little nest. They go and forage for food. They're not open to new things. If they get information of food over there, they won't go. They're resistant. They like it just where it is. They're in their nest with their slippers on. But the young ravens must be the ones that fed Elijah, because they were open to new messages. They can speak to each other, give each other messages. They can say there's food here. They go. They went and stole food from somewhere and delivered it to Elijah. It was the young ravens. Now, we know we've got to raise up young leaders, but we don't want to be old ravens in a nest with slippers on that we can't take in anything new, because we've got to set the way. We can empower and resource and do it together, old and young. And so in this shout from the beach, I want to encourage you, and I encourage myself, as we get older and more experienced in ministry, just like those fishermen, they were experienced, they had intuition, they knew. But a shout from the beach changed their direction. And let's you and I hear that shout from the beach, from Jesus, and say, show me what needs to change, that there is a supernatural catch.